Hello and welcome. My name is Thomas Kevin Dolan. I'm the author and writer of Little Fag, A Journey of Self-Acceptance and Healing. And today I'm going to read from section 3 of my book, chapter 3, on page 200 of my memoir. And the chapter's title is, It's Okay Not to Be Okay. I could never hit a home run the way he did. Mom called him her special boy. He was the gentlest of us all, and he too left the world. What I braved. There was a quiet grace about my brother, a gentleness I've always found comforting. Mom would share on many occasions, he's my special one. As an elementary school-aged boy, the idea of having friends over to play was always a fantasy. But given the violent nature of our household, it wasn't a risk I was willing to take. I distinctly remember on a blistering cold morning sometime in the mid-1960s, being woken up by a loud ruckus in the living room. When I made my way to see what the commotion was, the living room was filled with all my brother's hockey teammates. They'd come over to visit to see if he was okay. Mom explained that he was too sick to play in an important playoff game earlier that morning, and after winning the game, the team came over to see him. There were a few times I'd see an expression of excitement on his face, but that morning, his smile beamed from ear to ear. From across the room, I gently waved at him as he basked in the glow of being admired. It made me feel enormously proud of my favorite big brother. It would be rare to catch a glimpse of something my brother did. I called it a cute idiosyncrasy. That always indicated, whenever it is that he went into this little idiosyncrasy, it always meant that my brother was excited. Mom called it his warm-up. He'd clench his teeth, hold his breath, and start to flutter his arms, all to let us know he was unabashedly excited. I caught sight of his warm-up that morning, albeit a smaller sampling, because he was surrounded by his friends. I think Mom served hot cocoa to the boys who had stopped by. They stayed for a short while, being shuffled out by Mom as my brother's nasty post-whooping cough flared up. The captain of the team laid my brother's medal on his pillow and said, with a punch in the shoulder, yelled, "We need you next weekend. Get better." After his team left, my brother was shuttled back to his bed, the lower bunk of one of the 3 sets of bunk beds. When we were ill, we were relegated to the lower bed, so Mom didn't have to reach up to give us water, medicine, or a hug. I remember watching him gently close his eyes. Clearly, he needed to rest. After most of the day asleep, my brother finally stirred late in the afternoon. Interested in how he felt about his team coming to wish him well, I peeked around the corner to see if he was awake. I whispered, noting he was awake, "How did it feel to have your whole team here?" He propped himself up on the pillow, wiping the sleepiness from his eyes, and said, "I never knew they liked me that much." Knowing his gentle nature and watching firsthand how many of his friends seemed to really like him, I said, "I would love to have our friends over and have them show me how much they care. That would be amazing." His wolf blue eyes, an inherited gift from Dad, briefly met mine, and I heard him quietly say, Do you think they know that Dad beats Mom?" It suddenly dawned on me that he had the same reason as me for not inviting friends over. It was a secret we never spoke of, yet both of us halted friendships at the door to our house. I think I may have patted his shoulder as a sign of reassurance that I understood, but we had never spoken before of the fear that both of us held. In a few days, he was up and feeling energized. Beside our house, we had a small park with a pond that during the winter, the city would flood to make a small ice rink. The Dolans were the guardians of that small rink. After one day after school, he grabbed me as I rushed inside the door. "Let's go skating. I want to teach you how to skate as fast as me." With him being the fastest kid on skates in the neighborhood, it didn't take me a second to say yes. We grappled with skate laces, using the back shed of the house to put our skates on. He always tightened mine a little more snugly because he was stronger than me. We walked out the back door, jumped over the fence, and leapt on the ice. I loved watching him blast forward remembering on so many occasions how I thought that it might be me one day if only my brother would teach me. As he glided in after a quick trip around the rink, he shared this with me. I'd give anything for our friends to come over to play. I just wish it wasn't so scary at home. I remained quiet. After an amazing hour of lessons from him and some welcoming encouragement, I felt so proud to garner his attention. We'd closed our time on the ice with him telling me that he loved playing with me. We always have fun, he said. What I braved with my big brother, I realized today, was being open to hearing his vulnerability. I always felt so much respect for how he shared what was on his heart. I think he was my teacher for how to listen with my heart. The Unlearning. It was November 18th, 2012, the night my dear younger sister, took her last breath. As I walked into my sister's home in Calgary, my older brother met me with a profoundly warm and loving hug. I'm so glad you made it, he whispered in my ear. Although we didn't see each other much, our connection was quite astounding. Many times I would send a loving note on Facebook and he would reply, I was just thinking about you. Thanks for reaching out. At times our paths would cross at Mum's place and we'd share a laugh. He always roared with laughter when I brought a large degree of levity to me being gay. Oh, Tom, he'd say, you crack me up. He grabbed me one day at Mum's and shared, long ago I remember you making a vow you'd never get caught up in the violence of the household. I'm so proud you never had to hit Dad or any of your brothers. I wish I'd made that vow. His hand squeezed my forearm and he walked away. This brother of mine was a feeler. I knew the energy since feeling and being sensitive were two of my superpowers. He hid it well, mainly because he watched as I was mocked incessantly when I was a kid. He remained quiet so as not to be discovered. I thought it was a brilliant ploy and great self-care. A few years prior to our sister's passing, my brother's wife called to let me know that he'd been admitted to the hospital. She said, you know he never tells me when he's not feeling well, and I have a sense this might be pretty serious. The diagnosis had come back, and it turned out that my brother's kidneys were failing. In a brief chat with him on the phone, he laughed and said, I hate doctors. Do they really think this is going to stop me from having a few laughs? I hung up, feeling in awe of his perspective. At our sister's vigil, he and I stood together a lot of the evening, chatting about the nuance and the mystery of life. By this time, he'd begun full-time kidney dialysis, something he shared that was really taxing for him. I have a friend who stopped coming for dialysis, and I'm a bit worried about him, he quietly shared. I responded by asking, how long can you live without dialysis? His shoulders shrugged, and he quietly said, maybe a week. He walked away to grab a drink. When he returned, I noticed those gorgeous wolf blue eyes had lost a bit of their luster. He trained his sight in my eyes, and he said, I'm tired, brother, and I don't know how much longer I want to do dialysis. This time it was my turn to squeeze his arm as I gently walked away. I saw him at our sister's funeral a week or so after that night. His extended hug is equally as love-filled. He gently asked, are you ready to say goodbye? I leaned into an embrace with him and said, with a bit of a snicker, you know who buries the Dolans. As I presided over the funeral that afternoon, I remember glancing at my brother with his head cast to the floor and thinking, he feels tired to me. I bid my family farewell and tracked down my brother. Hey, I said, did your friend ever return to dialysis? With a tear in his eye, he nodded no. Then he quietly said, I'm a bit jealous. In time, I'd hear from his wife. Nearly 4 months had passed. She called to ask if I could come to see my brother, who was just admitted to the hospital. He'd been rushed via ambulance to the emergency ward. I said, of course, and please tell him I'll be on the 6 a.m. flight from Vancouver, and I'll be there around 8 a.m. As I summoned the energy of my brother, filling the space between us with love, I posed this question. Will you wait for me? This wisp of energy drew near to my heart, and I felt a gentle no. As I stepped off the train at the Vancouver International Airport with the intent to get on the 6 a.m. flight to see my brother, a text alert chimed from my phone. His wife had reached out with these simple words: "Your brother died at 3:40 a.m. this morning." The unlearning for me, inspired by and bestowed to me by my brother, was to move in life with more clarity. I love the example I received by him saying no to me. Would I wait for him? And of course it was energetically. He didn't wait for me to visit him. I chose to have love move me and not fear by going to see him anyways. It would be a gift I'd bring to practice in the spirit of my brother for the remainder of my life. He taught me to be clear about what worked for me. My brother Timothy Pat, as I call him, was a quiet soul, was a gentle soul, although I'm sure in his own way, and at times that I would never see. He probably was pretty tough. After all, he was a Dolan. Yes, I always loved his gentleness. I loved his snicker. I remember watching him play. He was in grade 10. I was in junior high school still at St. Francis. He was on the junior football team. My hero, oh, he was so fast. And it felt so cool to go and see him play on the team that I would play on the next year. And of course, I didn't know that I would leave that school in subsequent years. But my point in sharing this story with you was that he kind of blazed a bit of a trail for me. He did it quietly. He did it without a fanfare. And I think that what I loved most about my time with my brother was that he was never explicit with how it is he wanted to spend time with me, right? None of this, brother, I need to spend time with you. We would just be together or we weren't together, which I thought was actually lovely. So it meant that the time we spent together was quite natural and always love-filled and always fun, and at times a bit mysterious because there was a part of me that didn't know my brother, right? He, like my sister, had went off in a different direction than me. Right? Alcohol became part of his experience, smoking, friends, partying, and that didn't work for me on all kinds of levels. So there was a part of my brother I didn't know, and yet the connection I always had with him in this lifetime was always dear. And I think the thing I appreciated most was that he felt the gentlest of all, which reflected a gentleness in me that, of course, the world would not want me to be, right? You know, only little gay boys were gentle. So my brother actually always encouraged me to be the energy of gentleness. And not from the vantage point of be gentle, Thomas, but it was never not be gentle, Thomas, which I thought was really cool. So on some level, I think he got me in ways that the rest of my siblings, particularly my male siblings, didn't get me. And for that, I will always be appreciative. When I went to see him in the hospital, he'd taken his last breath. They left his body in the room so that I could actually visit with him. There was a strength about him that I was actually kind of wowed by. When I went to his body and I laid across his chest to hug him, he felt so strong to me. His body felt so strong to me. And I remember thinking to myself, how could it be that just hours before, the evening before, how could it be that this man took his last breath? It was like I didn't believe that he was dead. He felt so strong. So I had a beautiful whisper with him to wish him joy and peace and that he could finally rest and that perhaps he could now join that friend of his that had stopped doing dialysis. And I can only imagine the reunion that the two of them would have. So to Timothy Pat, I'll always be so in awe of your spirit, but mostly your ability to kind of hold me where I was in my life, and not just at one particular time, but for my entire lifetime. I have much gratitude.